What's happening, my fellow geeks and geekettes? Welcome to a brand new episode of Chris's Custom Collectibles, and today we are going to be very quickly pimping out the McFarlane Toys 7-inch Robert Pattinson figure from the Batman. Look how beautifully detailed this figure is. So, like I said, this is going to be a quick little custom collectible because honestly, not a lot is required to make this guy look a little bit better. We're also going to be replacing his plastic cape with a posable pleather cape. Like, look at the head sculpt. That is Pattinson to a T. So we're going to be using the pre-existing paint job for the mouth plate. We're just going to be doing a couple of washes just to give a bit more depth and a bit more gruff. Just a bit more of a 5 o'clock shadow going on. Now, like most McFarlane toys, the first thing we've got to do is pull this guy apart and give him a quick little soap bath and also remove the cape and the shoulder pad. So one shoulder pad has already come off, as you can see right here. So that's just going to make work a bit more easier in terms of doing a black wash, because we want to keep the grey of the suit there, but we also want to do a black wash to highlight all the plating and then go in and do some dry brushing. But before any of that, like I said, the first step is we got to pull this bad boy apart. So that being said, let's get to it. Ooh, as always, it is time for some shitty commentary. So one thing I love about McFarlane Toys is they're so user-friendly when it comes to dismantling them. The only real kind of fiddly stuff with this figure was the cape itself. We got to go back and forth on the actual back panel and the side panels themselves, and you want to be very careful when using your Stanley knife or extractor knife, whatever you're doing. Just make sure you're very careful with that. So we're gonna leave the collar intact. We need to use this later on and glue it back on to the base of the cowl and eventually glue the cape onto it. As you can see there, I'm just popping his arms off and his legs and his beautiful little bat diaper, which I do not have to cut anymore because Justin over at Justin's Collection was very helpful enough to tell me that the legs just pop off. So we're just gonna give him a soap bath just with some dishwashing detergent. Nothing fancy here, Geeks and Geekettes. This just essentially breaks down that barrier, that gloss coating that's put on these figures after manufacturing, and it's just gonna help the shoe polish adhere to the body a lot easier. And make sure you give him a good dry, even though it doesn't really matter if a little bit of water is stuck in there. It just helps that he's nice, dry, and a perfect blank canvas. So we're gonna grab our black kiwi shoe polish. This is undiluted, no water added to it, just in a cut-off paper cup, and we're gonna start the detailing process. So we're just gonna cover all the gray sections. We're not gonna dab away the excess this time around. So I'm gonna repeat this step not only on the arms, but also the legs and also the diaper. And you wanna give it a good hour to dry. We're going through some rain here at the moment here in Sydney, so weather isn't as hot as I'd like it to be for stuff to dry, but just make sure everything is nice and dry, especially in those nooks, crannies, those creases, the little pieces in between the armor plating. Just make sure it's all dry. It's just gonna help the end result look a lot better. And now we're gonna grab a scourer sponge and dip it in some hot water. Not too hot, but it's just gonna help break down the paint when we scour away the excess, or should I say scour away the shoe polish. And you don't wanna go too hard, but you don't wanna be too light either. It's not gonna affect the actual sculpt itself, but as you can see right there already, we're starting to remove that excess and it's leaving all that beautiful detail there on the armor plating of the torso. And I'll just wipe it away, give you guys a better look. Look at that. That's just a couple of scours here and there, and already it looks a lot better. And I'm just gonna repeat that process, of course, on the arms, the legs, and also the diaper. Now I just temporarily put him back together, minus his little bat diaper with his arms and legs, just to show you guys how he's looking so far. And you can tell already the depth, the detail that's in this figure now is ridiculous. It's chalk and cheese compared to the original look of the figure. Even the creases of his undersuit are there. Now, we're gonna start to color the faceplate. So I've just got some brown shoe polish with water, mixing into it just as I see fit, and we're going to be doing a wash pass of brown shoe polish and black shoe polish. That's all we're doing for the mouth plate. Like I said, we are using the pre-existing paint job of the mouth plate. I think it's a perfect blank canvas. I am not an expert at painting human flesh and lips and eyes and stuff like that, so that's something I still definitely want to tackle and get right, but overall I think this turned out pretty well. So with the first pass, we're going to put it on, dab away the excess, and you can build it up a bit more if you want him looking a bit more tanned, but then I repeat the process with the black shoe polish, again watered down exactly like the brown shoe polish was. Now you can let it dry a little bit, but you don't want to let it dry too much, otherwise it's going to be real patchy. But what I was going for was shadowy, gruff, as if it's casting a shadow on his face, as you can see right there. And once it's dried, it just looks a whole lot better. It definitely amplifies that beautiful sculpt of Robert Pattinson. Now we're just going to take some silver rub and buff, and this is a very subtle stage slash step of this custom collectible. I know the suit itself isn't very metallic, but this is going to accentuate the grey parts. And when we go in with our matte sealer, it's going to help tone it back and dull it back so it doesn't look as metallic, if that makes sense. Because there are parts of the suit, most notably the torso, the pants and stuff like that, that have much more of a grey tone than the rest of the suit, and just very lightly dusting it over those parts of the suit, as well as the chest emblem, going in and doing those pieces that are scuffed on his emblem knife, etc., and also certain parts of the breastplate itself. Now I'm also just doing the same to the gauntlet and highlighting all that beautiful detail. Once that step was done, we're gonna glue the shoulder pads back on and then go in and dry brush them, because I wanted to get as much detail as possible under those parts of the arms where the shoulder pads were covering, and not to mention going in and detailing the belt. There are only a few little silver accents here and there on the belt, and obviously it's got that carabiner hook triangle thing that he's got hanging down there, and then we can go back in once the glue has dried properly and detail those shoulder pads. Now we're just going to dirty up the boots a bit. We're just going to grab some burnt sienna, again with a little bit of water added to it, and then muck up those boots in certain areas and wipe away the excess. Now it does look very stark now, but trust me, once it's dry, it blends in and it makes the boots look nice and subtly muddy, used and worn in. Like he's been trampling around Gotham in the rain, in the mud, stuff like that, and also highlighting the laces. So now we're just going to glue that neck collar back on. Just going to add some glue dabs on the sides and on the back at the base of the cowl. Now, this is very interesting. This is the original matte varnish I used, but it made my figures sticky. So we're going to be using the Liquitex matte varnish instead, fed through an airbrush. This stuff is phenomenal. This is the second time I've used it on something, and it won't leave those figures sticky because it's an acrylic and it's so cheap. So I'm going to be using the airbrush that I used to airbrush the actual Pattinson Batsuit in the Batsuit video. And again, dialed out on full, just give it a nice mist all around. You can build it up over a couple of layers, just make sure each layer dries between. And again, you can see the change already, just what matting a figure like this can do to the detail, especially in the cowl and the head sculpt. I love it. Now the final step is we're moving on to the posable cape, and we're going to be using the pre-existing plastic cape that the figure came with as a template. I've just got some cardboard there and I'm just tracing around. So ideally the purpose of this stage is to widen the cape. Not too much, because we are dealing with a small scale figure. The wider you go with the cape, the more fiddly it is to get it to look natural and drape right. Even though this is going to be a posable cape, we're just opening it up about 8 centimeters on either side. I'm just cleaning it up. Then I cut it out just with some scissors, and we're going to grab some pleather, the template, and some wire. Now, this pleather was from Spotlight for ½ meter. It was $8, pretty standard pleather, and it's got a bit of a stretch to it, but also has a beautiful leather grain to it, much like Pattinson's cape. And I'm going in and I'm actually using a gold Sharpie instead of a silver Sharpie, because the gold, you can still see it, but it's not going to really soak in to that black fabric and kind of stick out like an eyesore. But when you are cutting out this template, you want to make sure that you're going and cutting the inside, not the outside. That way you're not going to have any gold exposed, even though most times out of 10 you're not going to see it. It's kind of just for safety reasons. You don't want to see any gold or unsightly bleed marks from the gold Sharpie. Now we're just going to grab our wire, cut it to length, and we're going to lay it down and apply the glue from the top. Because this is a woven wire, the glue will sink through straight onto the pleather and fuse the two together. So it was very easy to place and glue down, which made life a lot more easier. And then we're gonna fold it back on itself so we can hide the actual wire itself. And once that step was done, we're gonna start to glue the actual collar of the cape back to the collar of the figure itself. Now I actually popped the head off of this because it was kind of getting in the way and I didn't want to damage it or mess up the paint job or anything like that. And then once those stages were done, we're just gluing those panels into the top of the chest and then folding those pleats back on themselves and gluing them in place too. And then we're set for the final reveal. Probably should help if I pop his head back on too, huh? And there we have it, guys. This was a pretty subtle custom collectible, but I'm over the moon with the end result. And that matte varnish from Liquitex, the acrylic based one, is just an absolute dream to use, and I can't wait to use it on future custom collectibles. So with that being said, wherever you are in the world, please have yourselves an absolute cracker of a day. I hope you're well, hope you're happy, be merry, be silly, and until next time, geeks, please always remember, cosplayers do it best.